Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the History Made Awesome podcast. This is episode 16. It is currently the 9th of February. This is the second week of February. And we are looking good. This is a couple more to 20. And I was just talking to Ben right now that I think for episode 20, we'll do something special. But before we get to that discussion of that, Ben, how is your days going?
Honestly, this past week has been really good. Tuesday through Thursday, I went to let's see what to call it. It's an agricultural and health entrepreneurship academy, is what they call themselves. It was a 3-day intensive. The first day we spent like 10 hours there. The second 2 days spent like 13 hours there.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I missed some of my classes, but I was selective about which ones I missed.
I feel you. What'd you learn?
I also went to the dentist.
Oh, go.
And
I mean, like, what
I also had an interview during one of those days, and now I'm working in a lab.
Oh.
And my wife also got her first role in New York.
Oh.
All of these things happened within like 3 days.
That's awesome. So let's first start off. So so what was the biggest thing you learned from that little thing or whatever, the entrepreneurship or whatever you call it?
Well, let's say this. My favorite part was they had like these mentoring sessions.
Okay.
I was gonna say mentorship, and that sounded weird.
Yeah.
Mentoring sessions.
Yeah.
Where there were just there were about 60 like people that were attending and about 30 mentors.
Yeah.
And you spent like 15 minutes with it was just like a rotating thing.
Mm-hmm.
Spent like 15 minutes with like 6 to 8 different mentors, and it was just fascinating because you're supposed to have like an idea that you're pitching to them, and they give you advice or critiques or like an idea for a business. It's an entrepreneurship
Yeah.
academy. So you're supposed to like pitch your business idea to them, and then they like give you advice or they tell you if they would invest in it, or not, and they tell you what's wrong with it.
Go continue. Sorry.
I was just say that was my favorite part.
I was gonna say, did you tell them about a history podcast or history channel, YouTube channel? If that would be a good idea to invest in. wrong place.
Yeah, these were more like venture capitalists. I don't think there's ever been a venture capitalist that's invested in a YouTube channel.
I was like, I know a guy.
Well, these were all agricultural. Honestly, they didn't really fit my business thing either. They were like agricultural technology people.
I see.
They're like, oh, you have a new bacteria that'll help plants. I might want to invest in that.
I feel you.
Things like that.
I feel you.
Yeah, but it was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
And then what was the role that your wife got? Is it secret or?
Oh, so she no, so she was cast in a musical that it's an original musical. It hasn't been performed before.
Okay.
And she was cast as not a lead character, but she has a name. She's not just ensemble.
That's cool.
And the opening song is actually a solo that's done by her.
Oh, look at that.
So yeah, that'll be exciting.
That's cool.
That's all I really know about it because she just got the role like a few days ago.
That's cool. For myself, this week was probably the hardest week because I actually had to do a midterm. Well, not only that, but for the only one class I have a midterm on, what had happened is that the last week for this class there's just like discussions where like on Tuesdays where we not all come together, but we split off. Some people go with the professor, and other people like have students who lead the discussion or whatever. And so the last week, I had basically, because he had said like he had asked like for volunteers pretty much because like no one was volunteering. I was like fuck it, so after class I asked if I could volunteer for a discussion. He's like yeah, just send me an email. So I sent him an email the next day like, hey, like, if you remember me, I wanted to, I even told him my name, like, my name's Eric, and I would like to, what's it called, do it or whatever. He said, oh, just send me an email. So, like, I sent him an email the next day, and then he sends me back, like, a couple hours later. He says, oh, you're the 6th person in the queue. I'm like, what? I thought you needed, like, volunteers. What the fuck?
You weren't fast enough.
I know. So, they did their discussion. So I'm like, I didn't know if I was going to be, like, the next person, like, I didn't know what he meant by queue, like, oh, like, do it another time or whatever, or, like, those, like, 2 people were going to do it, and then, like, another 2 people were going to do it the next week or whatever from that queue. So I wasn't really sure how I was doing it, but the thing was that and this is what I'm talking about right now, this is, like, Thursday or whatever, or, like, on Friday.
Yeah.
And so we had a test the next week, which was yesterday. And so
Okay.
I was trying to figure out my schedule, like, because I had to do my research and I also had to prepare for that test, and I didn't want to be like that person like cramming in because I know that's not a very good test strategy.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. So I was like, I usually kind of read, but I usually finish my readings like on Tuesday, the day of the discussions. But what
Mhm.
happened is that on Fridays, like, or I think it was on Friday or Saturday, I forget what day it was. It was Saturday. Yeah, it was Saturday. No, Sunday, I think. Sunday or Saturday.
Okay.
Because like I remember,
Sometime
because
in the
I,
last week.
yeah, yeah, because it was Sunday because I had to send the person. It was during Super Bowl weekend. No, no, Saturday. It was Saturday. Saturday. My bad. Saturday. It was Saturday. So on Saturday, he sends me like, oh, like okay, you and another person in discussion. I'm like, great. Now I have to back my schedule up to where I now have to not only finish my research by Tuesday, or not my research, I have to finish like writing portions of my research by Tuesday, but now I have to prepare for discussions. That means I have to go more deeper into the readings because I have to actually know what I'm talking
Hmm.
about, and I have to prepare for
Yeah, you could
a
wing it. You
yeah,
could always
yeah.
just wing it.
I'm not the type of person though. Like if I'm gonna be like presenting or anything like that, I'm gonna be try to be as prepared as I can, and I have to prepare for
Nah.
that final for that midterm on that
Uh-huh.
Thursday. So I'm just like great, just great. So I go to the discussion, I crush it as usual, but then tell me what you think of this, yeah. So the person I was in discussion with, she's was a freshman and she's like I was talking to her on I think it was Tuesday or whatever. We had Skype
Okay.
before preparing for the discussion or whatever.
Okay.
And I was talking to her and she's like, yeah, like I'm doing research with a professor. I'm like, damn, you're only a freshman. You're already doing research. Like that's pretty cool. And like she's took in
Hmm.
like 4 years of like Japanese history and like so she's really know the knowledge or whatever.
Oh,
And
okay.
then I asked her like like this is a per person like to study with because like she knows like all the material like supposedly she does. So I go and ask her. I'm like, hey, would you have time to study like on like Wednesday or whatever?
Um,
And she's like, oh, I don't know, like I probably won't have time because I have other things, all that, cool, or whatever. But then she adds this one little thing where she's like, yeah, and I work better alone. I'm like, why would you, why would you add that? I mean, like, I would understand if I was that type of person where I'm like if I was like type of person who like doesn't put work in, you know what I'm saying? Where like
okay.
like we said, if I was the type of person where, like okay, what's study at 8, but like we don't study at 8, like I'm that type of person. Like
Okay.
I would make sense. Like I don't really trust you or whatever. But the fact that like I called you, I sent you a text, I emailed you actually, like on the Saturday night, basically at like 12 when I found out, like literally a couple minutes after I found out, I sent an email like, hey, can we Skype or whatever to do this thing or whatever. And so I'm not saying that like basically I'm saying is it like a dick move to do that to somebody to basically add that type of comment to that or or am I looking too much into it?
I think you're reading way too much into it.
Okay.
So okay, like legit, there was a guy who I wouldn't say I'm like close friends with him because I haven't kept in touch with him, but we were in like 2 or 3 classes together last quarter, and we hung out and chatted all the time. Like we would sit and chat for like a couple hours
Hmm.
at a time sometimes.
Yeah.
But like legitimately, we were in the same chemistry class, and I was like, "Oh, do you ever want to study?" He's like, "Not really. I don't like to study with other people. Like it's just his thing. He just doesn't like legitimately just doesn't study with anyone else at all. He just like." And honestly, I kind of get that. Like when I try to study with people sometimes, and I I don't really know what to do when you're studying with someone because when you're alone, it's like okay, I'm gonna do like practice problems or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to work on that thing. Okay, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But like when I study with people, it's like okay, let's do this problem, and then I do it, and one of us finishes first. Kind of like wait for the person to finish. Do we get the same answer? Yes or no? I don't know. It's like
Hmm.
I don't know.
Well, with myself, like I feel like I do better when I study in groups because if you're the person who supposedly knows all the information and if you're helping someone else who doesn't really
Hmm.
know it, they're like testing your knowledge on if you actually know like that material or not. It also
Okay.
kind of gets that conversation going back and forth because I feel like when you're just because for me because I basically just I didn't do anything else but just study for the test and
Uh-huh.
literally all I did was like look at my terms over and over and over again and it kind of got I won't say it got boring. I don't know. I don't know if it was actually effective. We'll see after the test or whatever. But I feel like if you just get that conversation going, it just makes it a little bit more interesting when it comes to study. And I feel like you just get to know the knowledge more because like you're testing your knowledge with somebody else as well, and not just kind of like You know what I'm saying? You need someone else to kind of like reflect on if you actually know the information or not. And sometimes you might just like, yeah, I know it, I know it, I know it. But then when someone actually like, you know, you probably may not. If you don't, if you can't explain it well to somebody, it's almost like how are you gonna explain it well when you get on the test? Kind of. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
what
I
I.
get what you're getting at. Honestly, so that does happen when it's in like a group setting,
Hmm.
like more than just like two people.
Yeah.
When it's in a big group setting, then it's more like, then you do sometimes get questions that you wouldn't have thought of, like you don't know what you don't know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know, again, when it's one on one, it's such a different dynamic. And we're in completely different subjects too, like
Hmm.
different fields.
Yeah.
So I'm honestly not sure how I would study for something like a history exam. Like, do you have to try to memorize things
I
or
think. Well, I mean, with
like?
with a lot of history exams, it's more about memorization. I think. But this one, this test was a little bit different. I won't say it was different. I don't know. It's just doing Japanese history or doing language or doing history like from other parts of the world except for Europe are a little bit like harder for me because all the words are like in like you know me and like trying to pronounce words and spell words, right? Like it's
Yeah.
already bad enough when it comes to like Europeanized names, but when you're bringing in like Japanese names or like Chinese names, it's just like a whole other ball game.
um,
And usually when I do European history, I was talking to another person that like a lot of times I might not know what the term is, but I can kind of like basically I remember things based on kind of like what's around it, kind of in a sense of like I already kind of know a generalized European history or whatever. So a lot of times I don't have to completely remember the term. I can just remember kind of like references to it or like similar things, similar aspects to it or similar
okay.
ideas, and that's how I kind of remember ideas and terms in a sense.
Okay.
But another thing is I kind of felt that like with this class, a lot of times when you're doing classes or European history classes or like the upper div class because this is the upper div class, you're doing maybe like 100 years maybe like
Okay.
40 years or 50 years, 60 years.
Gotcha.
But it's really in depth. With this class, we're going from like maybe 300 BC to like 1300. And this is
Oh,
only in
okay.
the midterms. This is only in the midterm. And so we're getting up all the way up to like the 1500s, basically before the Renaissance comes into play, kind of.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
it kind of makes it more difficult because like we're not just doing medieval history, we're also doing medieval and ancient. So there's a lot more stuff to remember, and like in only 4 weeks, so it doesn't help like trying to remember things or whatever. There's a lot more to it, but we'll see how we do in the tests, pretty much.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, but I wouldn't
yeah.
I wouldn't take offense at what you said. I
I
think
mean,
it made
no, I'm just saying that like my thing is like that's a very small, like a very like limited like mind type of thing. Or like if you kind of
mindset.
think in that,
Yeah.
you can't like grow yourself and to expand more. I don't really give a shit about myself because like in the end, I'm only gonna care about me in the end.
Okay.
But I think just for other people, like that's just very limited way of thinking about how they view the world essentially. Because
Hmm.
I do think because people don't like working in groups because people have that like group, like they have that one person in the group who doesn't do work. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, Funny enough, like I've done a lot of group work and I maybe ran into that when I was in high school, but like in college, not really. Um, I think I don't know, cause maybe because everyone who's at that stage probably wants to do well in the class. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe it's just my leadership, the way I interact with people. Maybe it gets them to do stuff. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't know. That's just one interesting thing I saw. And then, but on good news is that like I've completed half of my research, which is I was stoked about that. My pretty much on
Nice.
by the end of January, I wanted to get all my 6 biographies done, and I got that done, and they're all looking swell. So I have a week until I have to present. Well, technically 2 weeks this week, and then my thing's on until next Friday or whatever. So technically 2 weeks. So about like on Friday, I'll start actually preparing for the presentation. Um, and yeah, it's looking good. And I'm actually excited for like this last part because this part's gonna be the actual work, but it's also gonna be exciting work because it's like actually me doing the actual research that makes it unique instead of just doing biographies. So I'm totally happy, excited for that part. But yeah, so I think we should probably get into the rest of the podcast. What do you say?
Sounds good.
Okay, so as always, we're gonna
That's
have a quote of the week. So I need to get like a special, what's it called, a sound. What's it called, a what do you call it?
sound bite.
A sound bite.
Sound clip. Sound effects.
Sound effect. There we
I
go.
don't know which one you're going for.
Gotta get a sound effect for these. I'll make a mental note for future Eric to do that.
A mental note. Good luck with that.
I know, yeah. So this is the quote of the week. As again, all these quotes are made by people who've made strides in history, either recent or whatever. So.
Or historically.
Or historically, yeah. Even yesterday. This quote is not by me. Most of us, this is a quote, most of us who aspire to be tops in our fields don't really consider the amount of work required to stay tops. This is the quote of the week. I think it's supposed to be at the top in our fields. Don't really consider the amount of work required to stay at the top. So let me give you a little glimpse into who made this quote. Let me go. So this quote was made by Althea Gibson, who was a black female athlete who established dominance in the field of tennis by winning 10 straight national titles. And she also, in that period, she would win Wimbledon in 1957 and also win the French Open. And she's kind of considered one of the first African American best female tennis players at the time before Serena Williams or many other talented female tennis players. And so what happened is that basically the article, this is connected to an article we can try and jump into later, but in this part it says the tennis world was in fact among the least hospitable to integration, and the role of her black supporters was crucial to her rise. After qualifying for tennis' most prestigious tournament,
I bet
Gibson needed to raise money to travel to Wimbledon in 1951. Moore describes how, or one of her biographers described how many African Americans across the U.S. contributed. Boxing great Joe Louis purchased her travel fares to England. A black golf club, the Detroit Dufflers Golf Association, also made a German nation. It says, although Gibson did not win the tournament that year, she knew that people had it in her corner. Yeah. So I think that was in the next year, probably 1956 or whatever. Yeah. So what do you think about that quote, Ben? What do you think about that quote?
Once I found out it came from an athlete, it made a lot more sense.
Yeah, but
I thought it was an interesting quote, and then I found out it came from an athlete, and I'm like, oh, well, yeah. Being the top athlete in any, sport, it's going to be impossible.
But do you think
to stay there forever?
Do you think that you can expand that to other fields though? Not just
Yes, I think you can expand it to many fields, but not necessarily all.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. I think you can expand it to different fields, but it has different implications depending on what field you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like with athletes, it's like, oh, you degrade over time. Like you're just physically not able to keep up.
Well,
but with like academia or research, it's like, oh, well, someone else is going to make some big discovery. Even if you make like the biggest discovery in the world in your field, someone else down the line, when you get old, someone else is going to discover something that's the biggest thing at the time.
But do you think that as an academic or in academia, like you can't? Do you think that to be at the top of your field in whatever you do, don't you think you have to kind of revitalize the way you do research and the kind of way you think about the world you kind of live in? You just can't be stuck in. You kind of have to like, you know what I'm saying?
Being constantly evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true of any field, though. I think that's true of anything.
I think that's
especially business. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. Businesses will fail if they don't adapt.
Yeah.
That's like the one biggest thing.
And I think that can be connected to sports because as an athlete, because I think what she was saying, like to be at the top, you have to still work hard. And I think in that sense, you kind of still have to evolve. You can't be stuck to where you were before because eventually, like you were saying, someone else is going to evolve past that. Either be a better person or like do something else that makes their person's game a lot better.
Well, I think since the Olympics are starting now, I think it depends on what sport it is. Certain sports, I think very rarely does evolving in a sport cause I think it's usually just someone becomes physically better than whoever's at the top. It's very rare that a sport evolves in such a way. Yeah. Or at least not quickly, not like a single person. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is the high jump, where just one day a guy was like, I can jump a lot higher if I go backwards.
Yeah.
whereas everyone else was jumping forward, and then he just broke records, and then everyone started copying him.
Yeah.
um, and see, and then that's the thing is, even though he evolved, everyone else was able to copy it. So then it just became about physical aptitude again.
Yeah. Well, I think the point is basically like you can't you if you want to stay at the top in any field for you're not going to stay there forever. Eventually your body's going to degrade, your mind's going to degrade over time. And I think what that quote is saying basically like just because you're at the top of your field or the top of whatever you're doing doesn't mean that you still can't you doesn't mean that still don't you still don't put in work, doesn't mean you still don't evolve your game or the way you do your research or anything like that. You still have to kind of compete like you're almost not at the top in a sense.
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
that's what's being stated.
No, yeah, I agree.
So I think we
Makes
should
me think
probably
of
yeah
chess.
go.
I
Oh yeah yeah
said
yeah
makes me think of chess. Yeah.
I feel you. So we can kind of get into the rest of the article that this was come from. So this is the article is titled "Black Athletes and Black Activists." This is by Jules Boykoff from the trying to see where the trying to see what the website's from. I think it's Public Books or
Uh,
something like that.
yeah, publicbooks.org. Yeah.
Yeah. So this article the author kind of talks about how kind of with the Olympics coming around and like also different ways in which athletes or specifically black athletes are kind of like using sport as a form of like protest or demonstration in a sense.
Mm.
And also is connected to like there's several black athletes who are participating in the Olympic Games. And there's several like there's one from Nigeria who's gonna be doing I think bobsledding I think.
hmm
Um, there's
Hey,
also yeah, go.
sorry, kind of off topic. What do you think about the term African American versus just black?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because right now
Um,
you're saying it's because you're right now you're using whatever term is on the thing you're reading. So the thing before was using African American, but this one's using black, and now and you've used both of them now.
well, this person is using black athletes. I'm basically
hmm
saying, oh, so what's my idea on that?
Yeah, like what do you think about
Oh,
it?
that's a good question. That's a very good question. Um, hmm. Probably Africa. If you're talking about people who are from the United States, I think it would be okay to say African American
Okay.
because technically, you're in terms of like your connection to ethnicity in terms of the geographic location, you're technically from Africa. But then again, you might not literally be from Africa. Like for me, like
hmm
I would be considered like an Hispanic American, but I wasn't born
hmm
in any other. I wasn't born in Latin America, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think African American is a pretty decent term. But if you're talking about like black people in general, because I think this person talks about like it encompasses more than just Americans. But I
Okay.
think Americans make a big strive in things. I'm not sure in this article if the person talks of like he changes the terms kind of. I think the person uses blacks, but I think using African American is not that bad of a term. If you're to say a black person, it won't be that bad of a term either. Because technically they are their skin color is black. Like your skin color is white and my skin color is light brownish kind of. I think it's just what you attach to those ideas is what really matters. Later than the like the terms you use. I think maybe the terms that are connected to it probably. I mean the definition that's connected to the term, like the N word, is not a very good word to use because the connection to it, essentially, right? I don't know. That's what I got. Um, okay, there we go. So no, that's just my thing on it. Um,
Okay. Mm.
so I guess, oh, no, and this is also connected to when Trump made the term that immigrants, referring to immigrants coming from shithole countries, which is very silly. One of the silly things he did. And
One of
also,
many.
yeah. So the author kind of brings up many different African Americans who are participating in sorry, black people who are participating in these games because they're not all from the United States.
hmm
So we have one. So we have my Miami Beanie, who's Team USA's 17-year-old Ghana-born speed skater. If she were to speak up, so that's. We also have there's also a Ghanaian. Oh, sorry, not Nigerian. Ghanaian skeleton athlete Abokasi Fimo Fimapong, And then yeah, so U.S.-based Nigerian bobsled team of Seidin Adinin Akume Omega. Oh my goodness, Nozogi Onuwari, and these are several people who could be affected by these terms, whatever. They
Mm-hmm.
also talk about like a bunch of African American or Black female basketball players who are kind of in July 26th who kind of basically wore like Black Lives Matter T-shirts when they're during the games, and also talked about Philando Castile and Alton Stirring, who were two African American men who were shot dead by police, as well as Dallas Police Department, which had just lost 5 officers to gun violence. And Black Lives Matter was some of the T-shirts they wore, and also we know that the ESPN or no the Colin Kaepernick kneeling, some male basketball
Mm-hmm.
players also protesting. And I guess something happened at the ESPYs, same thing as well. And so basically, what this article kind of talks about is, I'm trying to see. So it kind of covers a book. It says historian Lewin Morris does not consider that mistake. So this book is that We Will Win the Day, Civil Rights Movement, the Black Athlete, and the Quest for Equality. Talks about how examines how African American athletes have used sport to fight for equality, and focusing on that period between 1945 and 1968. And so it says that traces how discourse shifted from African American athletes in the 40s as evidence of democracy in action to the in fist in the air revolt of the black athlete, and just kind of talks about that evolution. So it says
Okay.
more foregrounds, groundbreaking tennis star Althea Gibson, and Olympic gold medal winner sprinter Wilma Rudolph. And yes, these are like some of the like first female athletes who kind of broke ground, I guess, in sport. So let's kind of delve into it more. So it says most people are familiar with Jackie Robinson, remarkable shattering as a color barrier, and basically become the first African American to play in the major leagues in 1947. The same year, Robinson made his debut for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Althea Gibson established her dominance in tennis circuit, as we just explained what she did, which is awesome, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So continuing on Gibson's story, Gibson's rise was also partially fueled by Cold War politics. As her career unfolded, the U.S. was locked in a propaganda battle with the Soviet Union to offset Soviet depictions of racism on the U.S. home front. The federal government sent African American athletes abroad to showcase their freedom and talent. I find that just ridiculous. These efforts were meant to supply evidence that recognition came to those of true individual excellence no matter their race. And of
Mm.
course, notes more that these acts reeked of hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so with Gibson, she says, it says, but Gibson's participation allowed her to vie against top shelf competition from around the world, which improved her game. It says after she
Mm.
won the 1956 French Open and the Wimbledon in 1957, she was celebrated in the U.S. as the paragon of black success and advancement.
Okay.
Even as Gibson insisted, I'm not a racially conscious person. I'm a tennis player. I've never set myself as a champion of the Negro race. So one of the things
Mm.
they talk about is that so they kind of jump into a new person. So Wilma Rudolph also skyrocketed to athlete stardom along the way, writing a rags to rich script that would
Okay.
make Horatio Alger quiver with glee. She grew up in a poverty in rural Tennessee, suffered the indignities of Jim Crow, and overcame polio en route. Damn. To winning 3 gold medals in the 1960 Rome Summer Games. Republican presidential candidate Richard Nixon even tried to co-opt her star power to convert it into the black vote to his favor. Yet despite all this, she was a second-class citizen in her hometown, Clarksville, Tennessee, prompting one journalist from the Los Angeles Sentinel to ask, how is it that our athletes can represent the United States before the world and then have to come home to be treated like dogs? Unlike Gibson, Rudolph engaged in direct action to fight for her rights as African American, protesting at restaurants in Clarksville that refused to serve blacks. Her efforts scored swift results in less than 2 weeks. City officials desegregated Clarksville restaurants.
Mm.
So again, this book charts a number of numerous African American athletes, activists, also like Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, to lesser-known athletes like Rosianna Robson, who boycotted a state-sponsored U.S. goodwill tour in the Soviet Union because she viewed it as transparent political maneuver and designed to turn it into a Cold War pond. Golf enthusiast Maggie Hathaway was successfully to integrate courses in Los Angeles, and a bunch of other people. So during this article as well, Moore stresses how black sports writers were and remain violent voices, persuading athletes to be activists and pointing up the connections between politics and sport. When a Nobel Prize-winning African-American luminary was denied membership at the West Side Tennis Club at Forest Hills, New York, the black press urged Gibson to boycott the segregated club, when she refused, stating, "As long as they treat me as a person and a guest, I will play." Journalists poured scorn on her, and with one writer from New York Amsterdam News even crossing the line of propriety in an effort to convince her. "I'm so mad at Althea Gibson," he wrote. "I could break one of her best tennis records over her head." Damn.
Jeez.
This is journalists did not only fire vitriol athletes, they also protected them from it. When basketball star Lou Alcindor, who eventually became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he said he planned to boycott the 1968 Olympics. Many of the black press had his back, with the Michigan Chronicle editorial asking what must become more important to black youth: a few moments of fleeting glory or self-respect that will last him a lifetime. Let's see what else. Talks about how Moore shows how black press long functioned as vibrant examples of what Nancy Fraser calls subaltern counter publics. So subaltern means like from below, basically, like not subalterns, like talking about like people who are like well known and doing their history. Of subalterns, like talking about things that are like not like basically they don't write for themselves, kind of. So
Okay.
that's kind of what it talks about. It says vital discursive spaces where communities can formulate and reformulate oppositional ideas. Gold strategies. When in 1961 the Houston Informer editorialized the rampant racism in the U.S., aided rushes to get ahead of the United States in trying to win the minds and hearts of colored people, who make up 3/4 of the population of the world. The newspaper was floating an argument that became a key strand in U.S. civil rights discursive tapestry. Moore definitely weave sport struggles into the wider actions and strategies of the civil rights movement, showing how the movement both supported and was stretched by African American athletism. And this is how this is how the article ends or whatever. It says the sports human rights sociologist Ben Carrington operates as an important symbolic space in the struggles of black people for freedom and in liberty, cultural recognition, and civil rights against the ideologies and practices of white supremacy. Still, divergent models of African American activism continue and show up again in our current debates. Elena Moore Taylor identifies the weaknesses of the model that Althea Gibson and Jesse Owens seem to support. The demonstration of excellence will never be enough. Even Gibson's own story belies her claim to be only a tennis player. Her rise was fueled by collective efforts of the African Americans around the country and propelled by the politics of the civil rights movement. Today, athletes must contend with the notion that they should provide symbolism. Many of them realize that social change is a great deal more complex. Let the games begin. So what was your take on that, if you can kind of pick anything from that?
It was long. No, no. I don't know. I find it really interesting. I'm not sure which part to pick. So it kind of seems like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting where the part kind of, I guess, that he touches on at the end, especially where it's like she didn't want her race to be central at all to her career, but it kind of had to be because of the time that she lived in.
Yeah.
Wait, this is the same person. No, wait. Is it the same person who had the quote?
Yes.
Okay. So, what was it? What there was? I think there was another quote. When I looked up the quote, there was another quote that she had. I'm gonna have to go look it up now. What was the quote again? It was
Oh, it was the quote of the week.
Yeah.
Most of us aspire to be at the top of our fields. Says most of us who aspire to be tops in our fields don't really consider the amount of work required to stay tops.
Okay. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, that's not the website I used before. Oh no, I can't find it. Well, how about you start talking while I find my quote?
So I guess there's a couple things that are kind of important of it. It kind of brings in the idea. Well, I like this quote because I like this article. Sorry, because it's not only talking about the Olympic Games, but also brings in kind of another idea that's been kind of surfing around in kind of U.S. politics, but also U.S. culture as well. And it's also interesting to see kind of like the history of it, how this is not like a new thing or whatever. But also interesting to see kind of like if people want to, if these athletes want to make great change or whatever, it kind of shows that like the ones who actually made great change, who made great waves, are the ones who actually kind of participated in these kinds of events. And when it kind of showed with like athletes who are just kind of like my work will kind of speak for itself, and I just want to be seen as an athlete. Doesn't really try to like it doesn't change their identity. It only make their only identity at that point is the athlete instead of something else more than the athlete. Because the athlete is the one who basically produces amazing works on the field or on the track or wherever their sports are, the sports arena is. But I think like if you want to create real change in that, beyond the field or beyond that, you have to do things that are beyond what the athlete does. And I think it really just changes the definition of athlete once you start doing those things. And it also kind of shows the platform that you have as an athlete to do those things, like being able to go to the Olympics or be able to first person to go to like to Wimbledon or whatever to as a female athlete, even at that, which is even more difficult. I think that's kind of what I'm kind of seeing from this article.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Did you find that quote?
I can't find my quote. No, for some reason I can't find it. That's okay. Um, anyway, so just the thing I was saying was just that, yeah, it's I don't know. It's interesting how recent all of this was.
Mm-hmm.
How recent just black people getting into being able, so they gained suffrage obviously, but then just actually trying to get the country to accept them.
Yeah.
And all the steps that it took, and then how it was like, oh, they're being used, but it's also kind of helping them at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So like with the whole the Cold War and the propaganda and all that,
Yeah.
and it's just, I don't know, it's interesting to me
Mm-hmm.
how how it seems like we've come really far, but not at the same time.
I feel you. I feel you. No, I think I don't know. It's kind of they keep talking about discourse, which I find interesting, and I think that what people like fail to realize is that like when you have a discourse such as powerful as like the race relations and like the ideas around race and like how their rights should be, I think
Mhm.
like this discourse has been in place since like probably the 1700s, maybe
Mhm.
1600s, ever since slavery was or slavery of African Americans was a thing. Like or
In
no, sorry,
America.
or in America or blacks or Africans essentially.
Yeah, right.
People hailing from Africa. Like that thing has been around since the 1600s.
Well, it's been
And
around a lot longer than that, but
well,
yeah.
I mean slavery as a thing has been along, but like in terms of African like slaves are gonna be Africans essentially. You know,
In America.
in America or in the Americas. No, yeah, technically in the Americas, because you had the Spanish and the Portuguese bring slaves. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, you're right on that point. But yeah, that discourse has been around for such a long time, and so
Yeah.
it will eventually come to a point where that discourse will kind of fade and go somewhere else. Um, but yeah, it's gonna take a lot more time, a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? A lot more like
Time.
protesting essentially, or like
Okay.
athletes doing amazing things or people doing amazing things to kind of change the perception of how people think about race and like things of that nature. But yeah, I really like that article. It kind of blended in those types of things.
Yeah.
Before we move on, we should talk about what happened today in history, and we have another. I guess because of the Olympics, so I think that makes sense. So we have another.
Yeah.
This is another. So in 1971, Satchel Paige was nominated to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And kind of what makes this person kind of unique is the fact that he actually didn't play in the major leagues. He was
Mm.
actually the first Negro League player, veteran, to be nominated for the Baseball Hall of Fame. And if I can just kind of, this article is very short. It says in August of that year, Page, a pitching legend known for his fastball showmanship and longevity of his playing career, which spanned 5 decades. Wow.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Jeez.
Was inducted.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, yeah. It says Joe DiMaggio once called Page the best and fastest pitcher I've ever faced. Page was born in Mobile, Alabama, most likely on June 7th, 1906, although the exact date remains a mystery. He earned his nickname Satchel as a boy when he earned money carrying passenger bags at train stations. Baseball was segregated when Page started playing baseball professionally in the 1920s, so he spent most of his career pitching for the Negro Leagues around the United States. During the winter season, he pitched for teams in the Caribbean and Central and South America. As a barnstorming player who traveled thousands of miles each season, played for whichever team met his asking price. He pitched an estimated 2,500 games and had 300 shutouts and 55 no-hitters. Jesus Christ.
Jeez.
In 1 month, in 1935, he reportedly pitched 29 consecutive games. Oh my God.
Wow.
In 1947, Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier and became the first African-American player to play in major leagues when he joined the baseball Brooklyn Dodgers. The following year, Page also entered the majors. Oh, he did play for the majors. Okay, that's cool.
Oh.
Says signing with the Cleveland Indians and becoming at age 42 baseball's oldest rookie. Jesus. He helped the Indians win the pennant that year. Later played for the St. Louis Browns and Kansas City A's. Page retired from the majors in 1953, but returned in 1965 to pitch 3 innings for the Kansas City A's. Oh my God. He was 59 at the time.
What was this guy's name? What's his name?
Leroy Satchel Page.
Leroy Satchel Page. Okay, interesting. Dang.
It says,
Never heard of him. I'm not really into sports, though, but still, dang.
He was 59 at the time, making him the oldest player ever to play in the major leagues. In addition to being famous for his talent and longevity, Page was also known for his sense of humor and colorful observation on life, including, "Don't look back, something might be gaining on you."
That's funny.
And this other one. Age is a question of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. That's awesome. Sadly, he died on June 8th, 1982 in Kansas City, Missouri. Wow. That's cool. That's super awesome. I love sports so much.
Mm-hmm.
Sports is awesome.
Oh yeah, I'm not really into any sports.
That's okay. So that was our I guess event or thing. What happened today on Friday? I might just do more than Fridays. I might just do new Fridays. We usually record on Fridays, so I don't know. We'll see how that goes. So in the next few, we're gonna have the last part we're gonna have is kind of connected to I guess something that's kind of going on with the United States beyond just kind of connected to like we usually do. But these next 2 articles are gonna be kind of things I kind of found interesting, and then I also got one for Ben. So I've been talking for a long time, so let's talk about something that Ben might be interested in, and
okay,
DNA, because you like that DNA. So if you can kind of give us the lowdown on this article and kind of introduce this article to us mere mortals that we might not understand.
Okay. So wait a sec. I dropped my microphone. It's still live, but I dropped it. So this article is about the scientists were studying fruits, or well, not just fruit, but citruses, all citruses.
Read the title first. Go I chose.
Read the title. Fine. It says DNA: Story of when life first gave us lemons. It's clever.
Okay. For the people who didn't get it, when life gives you lemons,
make apple pie.
Oh. Damn it, Ben! You messed it up. Okay. So yeah, this story is by Helen Briggs by BBC News. But yeah, Ben, continue.
Mm-hmm. So the scientists were studying all citruses to figure out where they came from and how are they related to each other. How old are they? Because first of all, flowering plants are only about 160 million years old. So that's when we first started to get flowers, right after the dinosaurs died.
I see.
And so different fruits kind of popped up at different times, and citruses, I think it says, according to this, citruses popped up about 8 million years ago. So fairly recent as far as the scale of life.
Yeah, 800 million years. That's a long time.
Just 8 million, not 800.
Oh, 8
Just
million.
8 million.
Okay. That's still a lot, but okay, we'll continue on that.
No. They definitely didn't exist before. They did not exist before. That would be hard. Yeah, so they've existed for about 8 million years. It says that they popped up in the Himalayas first. The local climate became less intense, less wet, and less stormy. They weren't getting torn up anymore.
Yeah.
And the citrus was able to spread. And when any species of any kind spreads, it gradually becomes more and more diverse. You hear the cat?
Yeah. Okay, continue doing your thing.
Okay. So when any species spreads, it'll become more diverse. And that's what happened with this. So we started to get sweeter fruits. We got really sour fruits like lemons. And yeah, we just gradually got more and more different citruses. And that's kind of what they're investigating. And the purpose of this is that they were trying to understand, I guess, the genetics of citrus fruit better in order to kind of understand, or in order to be able to change them if we need to. If the fruits are getting some kind of disease, we'll better be able to know what to do in order to, defend it. Or if we just wanted to make it taste different. If we know that, if we for some reason find out that like, oh, sour ones are more common in this area and sweet ones are more common in that area, for these genetic reasons, then we'll be able to modify those genes and change the flavor of the fruit.
I think they kind of expand a little bit more because at the bottom it says, commenting on the study, Dr. Althea Gibson of Jordell Laboratory at the Royal Botanic Gardens of Kew said the research could lead to better tasting citrus, like you just said, and also as it highlights how the fruits we take for granted have had a complicated history involving migration, crossbreeding, swapping DNA between different populations, she said, and a greater understanding helps to inform future breeding programs, helping the crops to meet challenges such as climate change, disease, and breed characteristics desired by consumers. Fossil records of citrus fruits is poor. However, the fossil citrus leaves found in southwestern China, dating to about 8 million years ago, supports the data from genetic studies. There's also can we also kind of expand that out just beyond citrus fruits, like any of the things that like any of the like crops or like any things that we kind of eat today, like I don't know, like wheat or anything like that, or
honestly, so we already know a fair bit about numerous crops that we create. That's why we're able to do so many different GMO type things.
Yeah.
But yeah, this specific group was studying just citrus.
Yeah.
And most of their data will be fairly citrus oriented.
Citrusy.
Yeah, it'll be very citrus oriented. Yeah, it could potentially help in some way, but it probably won't. It'll be anything that's like, anything with the kind of skin that you find on a lemon or an orange, anything like that.
Yeah.
It'll probably help with those fruits. But other than that, it probably won't be very expansive.
So I guess like in a sense we already know how to make like certain we know how to make animals, and we know how to make certain like fruits and vegetables like taste better or like make them fatter or make things like that, right? Through this type of crossbreeding and everything like that. But from this, it seems like for citrus fruits, there's kind of like a gap in that kind of sense, like how we can make these things like fruity or anything like that.
I wouldn't say that. So these kind of studies happen fairly frequently.
Yeah.
With different foods. And so like say, you can't just like go to a food scientist necessarily and just be like, I want this fruit to taste sweeter, and I want it to be bigger, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this.
Yeah.
They might be able to, but it really depends on what you bring them, because some things are just studied a lot better than others. So something like wheat, we definitely have many mechanisms that we understand, and we can defend it decently against diseases, or we've been trying to make drought tolerant everything, every type of plant, for reasons, obvious reasons. But so this study is very interesting because it's completely citrus oriented, and the now food scientists will have more data to be able to change things about different citruses.
Mm. To be fair, I chose the one of the reasons why I chose it not because of the interesting article, but just the title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
had a feeling. I had a slight feeling there.
I was surprised that the BBC actually made a joke. I was surprised. That's pretty awesome. I just like seeing like how. I think also another thing is that we like when we look at like plants or any type of plant, we just think, oh, the plant has always been there and it's always been like that. But to know that like no, it's gone through lots of variations and like plants are different. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Any animal or animal, any living thing you see right now was definitely different at some point in time.
Yeah. Yep.
Since life didn't really just kind of come into being.
Can we make like a lemon apple, or like a lemon? I don't know. Let's put some weird thing together.
That sounds unpleasant, but yeah. You'd go to a food scientist for that. You'd be like, okay, I want the sourness of a lemon, but I want it to be inside of an apple.
Ooh.
They could do that. They wouldn't commercially because it's not worth it, but if you had enough money for them to do it like as a one-time thing, they might be able to.
Oh, I might. How much do you think this cost?
A lot.
Damn it! I'm like, let's make a strawberry banana. Oh, that'd be so good. A strawberry banana. That'd be awesome.
That would be. Do you want the banana to taste like a strawberry or a strawberry to taste like a banana?
Can I put them together like a strawberry banana like weird ass? You could just do that already. But like, what if you can fuse the banana and the strawberry to make it something else? That'd be like. That'd be awesome.
I think I saw a webcomic about this recently.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas right now. You know what you should do? You should go to the the entrepreneurial thing. You should sell that as your business thing.
Yeah, that would get torn to shreds. All the mentors are like from the industry. They'd be like, "That's just not gonna work."
I won't make it work. God damn it. Guys,
I mean, more power to you. They're just not going to invest in you.
I'll be like the Bill Gates of like weird fruit shit.
The Bill Gates in what way? Because I don't think you're going to make a lot of money off of that.
That's what they said to Bill Gates.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone said that to Bill
Gates. That's what they said to Steve Jobs, but look at him.
Oh man, I don't know. No, okay. If you manage to find a technology where you can easily combine any different fruits, you would make a lot of money. But
my brother is an engineer. I'll get him on that.
Oh, you need to be like I don't even know what you'd need to be for that. Genetic engineer? I'm not really sure how you would go about doing this.
You guys,
you know what? Actually, wait. No, I think actually I do know how to do this. There's like this device. It's I forget what it's called. It's kind of like a centrifuge, only it's the opposite.
Opposite. God damn it, Ben.
What's it?
Wait, go back. What'd you say?
What happened?
I don't know.
Did I get broken up?
Yeah. What were you saying?
Serious? Oh, no, I said yeah. I think a device like this already exists. It's kind of like a centrifuge, only it's the exact opposite of that. It's called a blender. And it combines all the flavors together for you.
I know. I was just being stupid or whatever.
Okay.
No, I know. I was gonna say like you can technically do that by just get banana and strawberries and put it together. But if you fuse it together, what if it be like something different though? I don't know.
That's a good question actually.
Like if you put if you put a cat and a dog, you're gonna make something else, yeah? Some weird ass thing. A dog. Yeah,
it'd probably be dead. I don't think you could create that.
You know, like the sound your cat make. I'm gonna just use it as whatchamacallit, as a sound effect before we do the quote of the week.
Okay, you can do that.
Yeah, sweet. Okay, so let's move on to the next article. This article I enjoyed. It was actually really interesting, and I think there's a bunch of. I actually like to be a food historian. That'd be a pretty cool job.
A food historian?
Yeah. So this article is titled "In the Pursuit of Tea and Taste." So this article kind of looks at. Well, it's not really an article. It's an examination of several books. Um, and it kind of tracks how the British Empire manipulated like their foreign diplomacy to kind of get more tea, essentially. So I'll kind of give you a rundown. So the article starts off by saying that when Samuel Pepys sampled his first cup of tea in 1660, the China drink was an expensive novelty promoted mainly for its medicinal qualities. At the same time of the Restoration, the British embedded 10 times as much coffee as tea. By 1730, the position had reversed. The great British love of affair with tea had begun. It says over the next 200 years, tea would become inexorably bound up with British national identity. As collectively the British tipped more and more tea down their throats, the cuppa would come to symbolize temperance, domesticity, purity, and industriousness. Tea got us up in the morning, it kept us going through the working day, and took pride of place on the dinner table, and helped win 2 world wars. When George Orwell defined Englishness in 1941, he pinpointed the football match, the pub, and a nice cup of tea. Yet it did not begin like this. As Erica Report explains in her wide-ranging study, tea was both the product and tool of the empire. Britain came relatively late to the Tea Party. Oh, good one. The Dutch, French, and Portuguese first developed a taste for tea from China in the 1600s, and introduced to the British trading rivals. Before, basically, they were saying that well, in this next part, they're basically saying that many people had different ideas of tea. Like it was considered something that was like a destroyer of health, or it was something that an ideal custom or observed expense. That's what some people thought. And yeah, so as national tea habit grew, along with the introduction of social ritual and afternoon tea, fears in Greece that Britain was too reliant on China. Thus, the discovery in the 1820s of tea growing wild in Assam in the British-controlled India was met with euphoria in government circles. Over the next 70 years, political and commercial interests combined in cultivating tea throughout southern India, while simultaneously promoting a British appetite for India tea through a sophisticated marketing campaign. So basically what they did is they felt that this tea was not actually tasty. So what they did is they add like a leaf of like Chinese tea to the tea to kind of make it, basically taste a lot better. And essentially what would happen is that basically this tea from India would become more like, it would come, by the 1880s, it would become more popular than China tea. It says that British tea addiction declined from the 1960s as coffee drinking rose, despite valiant efforts to promote tea as cool, with campaigns such as "Join the Tea Set." Ugh. Today, Britain is the only third.
I thought you liked weird puns.
I do, but they're taking. I don't know. I don't know. I like it. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. Today, Britain is the only third biggest tea drinking nation in the world after Turkey and Ireland. Report's book provides a sweeping survey of British Empire's complicated relationship with tea, while exposing its abuses and exploiting land and people in pursuit of the tea leaf. A big chunk of the book, with over 100 pages of footnotes, it needs a few cups of tea to consume. Ah, goodness. By contrast, McCarthy and Devon's book focuses on one particular player in the tea story. Today, James Taylor is largely unknown in his name's column, but in Sri Lanka, he is revered as the father of Ceylon tea. Having left his native land as a teenager, never to return, Taylor introduced tea Ceylon, which is in India. As Sri Lanka was then known in the 1860s, and was almost single-handedly responsible for its success, yet he died possibly by his own hand. In disgrace, a troubled and controversial character who fathered several children with native women, Taylor's life can be seen in symbolic tea bitter. Life can be seen as symbolic of tea's bittersweet tale. So, yeah, tea was extremely important.
Still kind of is.
Yeah, so it says that it's basically I bet you because 1820s. Yeah, I find and also talk about sugar. Like another good part is sugar as well. Like sugar being super duper important. Because basically when the Europeans were introduced to sugar, they're we gotta get this shit. It's almost as bad as crack cocaine almost, where like you have to go like to extreme levels to like take over islands, take over specific parts of the world to like basically because we need this stuff to survive, kind of. So it's like it's kind of crazy to kind of see that. I'm trying to think of like now, and it's because you guys. I think especially during like the Imperial Age, especially like this idea like this like based on like we needed like spices from India, so we need to find these routes because we need for it to be cheaper essentially.
Okay.
And when it comes to like when you're talking about like the reliance on China, like during this time, China was like basically like if you wanted something awesome, you had to go to China to get it,
Mm.
and basically to get that stuff, it was like
Okay.
super expensive. Um, basically, it was costing lots and lots of gold and silver because basically
Okay.
China has everything, but they don't have silver. So
Okay.
basically, like Spain would spend like lots of like they would get like they would dig up a lot of silver from the Americas and basically pay the China pay for tea or anything else they wanted to get or China, Chinese China or anything else they wanted.
Mm.
And so I think when they were saying the reluctance on Chinese tea, I think it was connected to that how they're spending so much money on like Chinese tea or whatever because it's expensive basically because you
Yeah.
can only get it through China. So when they discovered that the fact that they can actually get it from India, and actually Britain can actually they actually owned large parts of India, it made sense to like basically get tea from India. And then yeah, so it's kind of cool to just kind of see that and crazy. I don't know. I'm not. Do you like tea? I'm not a big tea guy.
I do like tea.
Oh, I don't know. I just find like tea can just taste like weird water. It tastes like weird water to me.
You need to make it stronger. If it's really weak, it does just taste like water, and I hate it's. Yeah. No, then it's really bad.
So yeah, like so
Have you ever had milk tea?
milk tea. No.
It's literally just tea with a bunch of milk in it.
Oh.
It's really good.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's kind of crazy to see like how and kind of connected to that like also brain kind of did a shitty thing to China, like also like I guess not only did tea come from India but also what's it called opium came from India as well. So a lot of
Mm.
times they would sell it to the Chinese because basically like the Chinese would get hooked on that. So instead of
Okay.
paying them like gold or whatever, they give them opium,
Mm.
and then that's how you start the opium wars in the 1820s, which is interesting enough
Yeah.
around the same time that India had happened. Actually, there were two opium wars, I think, or one, I forget.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting, a kind of cool story about that. Let's go to the next article. So the reason why I chose the next article is because I'm currently doing a history of Spain for my research, and so let's go find that article. Let's go do. So recently, not recently, but a couple weeks ago, uh, uh, people of the Spanish, I guess they're intelligence services, and also I guess historians as well, they were to crack a 500-year-old secret code by King Ferdinand, and basically the this was basically Ferdinand, basically like Ferdinand of Aragon, who was one of the basically when they had the Reconquista, right? When because Spain was Aragon and Castile. You would know this, Ben, because you play Europa Universalis.
Yep.
Um, so basically, they would Aragon, which is Ferdinand, and then you had I think Isabel from I think it was Isabel, yeah, from Castile. They formed two houses, and you had the like basically the modern Spain that we know of today. When he was trying to, so basically, not only did they reconquer Spain from the Moors essentially, but they also were trying to take Sicily as well. And they would hold Sicily until they would basically take it like in the 1500s, early 1500s. They wouldn't hold. They would hold until like the 1714. And so during this time, they also found like a lot of like coded letters, basically. So in case military orders fell into the wrong hands, you couldn't read the code essentially. And it's still even today we still use code. But like it was crazy because this thing was like for 500 years this code hadn't been breaking and hadn't been broken. And it says that yeah, so basically these letters were on display at the Spain's Army Museum in Toledo, and it took intelligence service almost a half a year to decipher four of them. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
because like literally like like our modern day intelligence services deal with codes that are like way more complicated, like computer codes and like different things like that. But the fact it took them half a year also kind of shows how sophisticated it was. So some of
That's
it said,
crazy. I was looking at the description of the code, and it's like, it sounds incredible.
so yeah, the code cracking has been described as as a Rosetta Stone moment, amid hopes that it could lead to more coded letters being deciphered. It says the detailed outline in letters range from instructions on troop deployments to admonishing commands for not consulting the king before launching diplomatic initiatives. In the early 16th century, it would have taken 15 days for letters to get between the monarch's residence to southeastern Italy, where the commander was based. So, what was the code like? It says mysterious coding system was used by Ferdinand of Aragon and Gonzalo de Corbo. Was highly complex. It was constructed using 88 different symbols and 237 combined letters. For each letter, there was between 2 and 6 figurative characters, such as triangles or numbers. To complicate matters even worse, the symbols used letters. To complicate matters even further, the symbols used in the letters were written without separating words and phrases.
Mm.
And yeah, so they were fighting at this time, Spain was fighting the Muslims in Naples during 1509. So that's awesome. That's truly awesome.
Yeah.
The fact yeah. So what's your take on that?
I wonder if the general or commander or whatever had like a codex. Like, how did he? Did he have to memorize it? Who made the code?
I don't know. Probably some smart person. You know, this is the Renaissance,
Man. That's so complicated. Someone just made like a really extremely obscure system and probably just had a manual on how to read it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the only way. Like, I don't think this is something where it's just like, oh, some simple trick where you can easily decode it.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like the type of thing where you have to
it's work.
have like a book about how to read each individual letter.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to know that like the people were so advanced at that time that like they can create a code that like modern day observers can't even like decode, or it takes them a very long time to decode, which is crazy. And yeah, it's just like I don't know. I just saw that article and just was like, oh,
yeah, no, that's really cool. I like that. Yeah, I mean, humans have stayed Homo sapiens have stayed roughly the same intelligence for the past several thousand years. I mean,
really, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Our knowledge base just keeps growing.
Don't our brains get bigger though?
No, they've stayed. If you traveled back 5,000 years and just stole a baby, raised it in modern times, it would be exactly the same.
So why can we create computers and they couldn't create computers back then?
Because we have 5,000 extra years of knowledge.
Well, because we are beings of experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, once we created written language, that just like exponentially increased technological advancement ever since. Because if you think about it, before written language, all you had was just oral traditions, and like how many things can you really pass on when you have like a tribe of 10 people and then you all interbreed, so then you have genetic problems anyway, and your intelligence might be lower just due to that. And then you have lower nutrition, so your brain won't be as developed necessarily. And then all you have are oral traditions. Like, you're not going to build the technology or create art. You're going to be like, okay, I'm going to memorize every single plant in this entire area and know every single tree and every single animal. Like, they knew, humans were smart. They knew, like, they had a virtual map inside their head of every square inch of their surroundings. And we don't do that because we don't need to. So we focus on more, advanced things.
Yeah, I can see that definitely. The one thing I would add is that, like, I think also, like, history and events also change it as well. Like, there's certain events that occur, like, like the Ice Age, or, like, these massive, like, not only, like, like these events that happen within our atmosphere, within our like environment or whatever, but I think also just like civilizations falling and rising essentially. Like one civilization, like the Romans for example, like made great strides in advancing technology, right? Like even better than medieval Europeans. Like they had soap like before the Renaissance era. You know what I'm saying? They were cleanly. They had baths. And so I think also like if a civilization was to stay on the path, I think they would eventually get computers maybe in a short amount of time, or they might get to that point eventually.
I don't know, because a lot of things about that is just material resources. For modern computers, you need silicone.
Yeah, I mean like advanced technologies, though. What I'm saying.
I don't know, not necessarily. Honestly, like problems are what creates innovation.
Mm,
That's why the Dark Ages is one of the most innovative times in European history.
mm. Good point.
When everything goes bad, that's when people, you have to innovate. And
True.
that's what humans are good at, is innovating using our minds. That's why we've survived so long, is because we are able to adapt with our minds.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas other animals might be able to adapt more physically, we adapt mentally.
Mm. True. That's a good point. Very good point. I like that.
Meanwhile, I mean, there's things like, like penicillin is a good example. Um, Even in the BC times, so penicillin comes from a mold. I should start with that. Even in the BC times, it's recorded that people were using mold to fight infections.
Hmm.
They just figured it out. And the only reason someone didn't invent penicillin is because they didn't have the biological technologies that we have now, or the chemistry technologies that we have now, in order to purify it. Because if you inject someone with mold, it's toxic. But if you isolate the mold and grow it really like grow a ton of it, and then basically destroy the mold and isolate the penicillin,
Mhm.
then you have a medicine, and it's like a miracle drug.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So that yeah, they make some very good points. Yeah. So that's crazy. I didn't know. I remember there was like I remember I was in like what's it called? Physical anthropology.
Hmm.
I was taking a couple years ago, and I forget what it was. I know that human beings are constantly like evolving in terms of like their physical structures.
Hmm.
I don't know if that was connected to the brain or not. I'm not sure if they said anything about that. But I know like our bones are like changing because we're seeing a lot more and things of that nature. We're
Hmm.
like getting smaller, like our diets are changing, so our bodies are like not being as healthy as they could be, which makes sense in that sense.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up more because
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that one, but yeah. So we are down to the last article. So the reason why I kind of chose this article is because like I think that there's kind of like this. Well, this article kind of revolves around like what is like who do politicians really work for? Do they work for the rich or do they kind of work for the poor people or like who are their actual masters? Because like if you look today, modern in modern politics today, especially in the United States,
Hmm.
how you have certain people being elected and a lot of the country doesn't believe that they should have been elected or because what they're doing doesn't represent their ideals.
Hmm.
I think Trump being the biggest person who represents that in a sense. But also you have like a lot of these different people like DACA. You have all these different like people who feel like they're not being represented, and then the rich are being represented. I think a good example of that is the recent bill that was passed. Um, not the bill that was passed today, but regarding the tax bill. This tax plan is supposed to be helping the poor or helping to build the economy, but it's really just helping the rich.
Mm.
So this is what the article kind of revolves around. So, well, this article kind of talks about a new documentary that's coming up on BBC. Not BBC, PBS,
Okay.
the American Experience, and it talks about the Gilded Age. So if you guys don't know what the Gilded Age is, the Gilded Age approximately takes place around probably the end of the Civil War, all the way up to like the early 1910s. Is like around the Gilded Age. You have the Vanderbilts, you have all these big families or whatever.
So it's just the Industrial Revolution,
Uh, Probably
or and a little bit earlier than that. So it's a little broader.
no, it's more like like Vanderbilt. Who's another person? The oil. Who's another like the oil tycoon?
Rockefeller.
Rockefeller. These guys who
Carnegie.
basically create these large.
Yeah,
What do you
the
call
people
them?
who are richer than anyone can be anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, it talks about how this show kind of describes how things are going now, in a sense.
Hmm.
So this new PBS series is called Gilded Age, and on the American Experience, and it kicks off with the story of. Da-da-da. I'm trying to see how I should do this. So it's only 6 pages, so I think I can read a little bit and just maybe jump over some things. So this is by Malene McFarland, And this series starts off with the setting is an extravagant gala that took place at the Waldorf Hotel, which attracted everyone who was anybody in New York City. Photographs of attendees are styled to resemble portraits of European aristocracy, with elaborately dressed and coiffed men and women engaged in what appears to be an insane game of one-upmanship. Other photo portraits of an earlier ball hosted by Vanderbilt in 1883 are more ridiculously yet. In one, a woman wears a luxurious feathered hat. Another features a lady of means sporting an entire taxidermized bird on her head. Both may have been outdone by one person who made a jaunty chapeau. I don't know what that is. What appears to be half a feline. Yes, a cat. And this kind of represents the insane rich and the chasm between the rich and the poor. This is to contrast this opulence documentary. To contrast this opulence, the documentary's director and producer Sarah Colt introduces many photos and less fortunate and includes a brief account of an impoverished mother who records she has spent the last cent she has and was forced to send her children off to work without food. It says this new series premieres Tuesday at 9 p.m. Yeah, so yeah, it says it's compromised by. It says this era is comprised by the 3 decades following the Civil War's ends, nor will it be the last. And it also talks about how there's many other programs that are being produced that kind of show the opulence of this era. Like one example is going to be on BBC. It's going to be coming on NBC, and it's made from the person who did Downton Abbey, and it's time to be progress in 2019. And there's a bunch of other people kind of show like this opulent lifestyle or whatever. Maybe don't take into account this other idea. It says this is part of history refrains that glamorous and easy to remember. The part about the Gilded Age so many forget, as historian Neil Irvin Painter describes, is the era title title represents a wide deceit committed upon Americans. At the time of that Vanderbilt Gala, the majority of American economic fortune was tied around 4,000 families, less than 1% of the population. Together, this small group of people held as much wealth as the other 11.6 million families combined. This is the richest person, or the richest represent a patina, I don't know what that word is, a shiny exterior camouflaging their rot underneath. Never does the Gilded Age point out the similarities and connections between the parallels between the turn of the 20th century and the times we're living in, but it doesn't have to. Those photos and descriptions of the lengths to which the Alva Vanderbilt goes to ensure her family's brand is promoted in the press can be thought of as the ancestor of social media. The article goes on. The Vanderbilts still have prominence in our culture thanks to Gloria and her son and Anderson Cooper, but the family in their heyday bears more than a few similarities, perhaps to the Kardashian Wests. Even how their wealth building may seem familiar to anyone with a passing knowledge of history of today's tech giants. As the country capitalist system transformed from a structure based on localized commerce with one dependent on an urbanized workforce tied to industry connected by a new means of shipping, at the turn of the last century it was railroads and now it's planes. All these alternations changed consumer habits and in turn shifted the distribution of wealth and power of the wealth and the power of ordinary citizens have to impact our democracy. Basically says that still with us, as we are all the old ideas that Americans poor somehow deserve their lot, which leads into a political history that receives a profound examination of the Gilded Age. This counterbalance to the tales of Morgan's aggressive bomb blast tells the stories of Mary Elizabeth Lease and Harry George, whose efforts spurred a swell on working class populism that threatened to topple a two-party system. It's as though they did not succeed, as we know, but they pose the same issues that we're wrestling now as we look towards the midterm election season, seeking to course correct form a path that has led American to its current socially and political riven state. And this is the last thing. It says, the essence of democracy is equality. Everybody gets to vote. Historian H.W. Brandt observes the Gilded Age. The essence of capitalism is inequality. And again, the one history lesson is that does politics serve the rich or does it serve the poor? What's your
I
take
really
on that,
like that
Ben?
last quote. I really like that last quote. When I first read it, I was like, dang, yeah, that's accurate. That's very just, it kind of sums it all up, I think. Yeah, I mean, with, capitalism is all, fighting.
Capitalism, what?
It's
Sorry.
like a survival of the fittest.
Oh yeah,
Capitalism is all about sort of fighting. It's like a survival of the fittest type thing,
yeah.
and it's not designed to help people. It's just not. It's designed for innovation and advancement and wealth creation.
Hmm.
Um, but it's yeah, it doesn't actually end up helping people. Whereas democracy's ideals are supposed to be that yeah, everyone gets a vote, blah blah blah. But when you have capitalism and the democracy intermingled, you end up with yeah, everyone's supposed to get one vote, but does each vote actually count? Can we stop some of those votes or cancel them out?
Hmm.
And then of course we have the American version where it's all concentrated in like 5 or 6 states where everyone else's votes are kind of irrelevant when it comes to the presidency.
Yeah. No, no doubt. Um, yeah, I think it was really kind of shown during that time where the rich really did have power. And it's crazy enough because I was watching a History Channel documentary, and it was talking about how like of course all these people built their wealth on what's it called what's it called when you bring together you take over an entire industry. It's called a
Monopoly.
there we go, monopolies. And so like these people have like lots of power, and like if you're a politician, you don't want to like you want to go against these guys because they can pretty much end your career pretty much. And like I remember the only person who was able actually to kind of end these kind of monopolies was started by Roosevelt, the first one.
Yeah.
Um, and for him, that was like seen as like a big thing or whatever. And that's when we start to
Hmm.
see like their power start to collapse. But if I remember correctly, didn't they just kind of spread out their wealth, but they still kind of held a large amount of the wealth that they actually had. If I remember correctly, I think that's what happened. Oh no, no, it wasn't. I forget what it was, but it's crazy to know like that's kind of like that. What was then is still going on today, and maybe will
Well,
go
those
on forever though.
companies. So totally fine. He
So
was still extremely wealthy. It was like, oh, your giant company has to become General Electric, and like all of these companies that still exist today.
mm-hmm.
He went from being the owner of one giant company into the
There are many giant companies, right?
and not quite the owner, but like benefactor of several small companies.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how Comcast and Time Warner like go into meetings and are like, "Hey, I get this county, you get that county, I get this neighborhood, you get that state, I get this piece." And it's like, "Well, we're not a monopoly,
Mm-hmm.
but they kind of are
Yeah.
because no small companies are able to compete because they get bought out or stomped out or contracts are made with the local government so that no one else is allowed to be in."
Mm-hmm. No, but I think what this story is kind of telling, and I actually want to see it. It'd be really interesting to see.
Mhm.
Um, I think what it's trying to show is that within the system that we have, this thing will always go on. The industry and who was in control will change, but in the end,
Mhm.
this kind of level of poverty and the gap essentially will kind of always be there.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's other capitalistic, democratic republics that exist that don't have problems quite as large as we do.
But then again, aren't they more? They're
That's
more but
because
like on
they,
socialist systems though. They're more like a
yeah,
yeah
but they, well, not socialist system, but just social, they have socialist, like,
yeah socialist
programs.
yeah.
But they're not socialist. No, they're not
Yeah, I
socialist
mean they're
governments.
not.
They're still
Yeah,
capitalistic.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm trying to think of the word that's used, but like yeah, it would technically be socialist, socialist, socialist. No, it would be technically like because socialism is like kind of like communism without like the violence, pretty much. It's more
Oh
like
no, I mean, are we
there's
talking about
like there's no democracies.
historically or like
There's
ideally?
like institutionally they're like no like institutional principles is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Like they technically still vote, they still have a vote, or whatever, but like they decide to use their tax dollars to pay for um roads and things like that.
Well,
Or
so
schools and things
isn't
like
it
that.
like communism is basically controlled by one central government who divvies out everything equally?
Yes.
Capitalism is every man for himself. You get what you get, and if you don't, then you die. And
Yeah.
socialism is the state controls everything, but then the people decide what goes where.
It kind of depends. I don't think there's a true socialist system.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, yeah, but there's
there's
like,
a defined one,
yeah,
certainly.
yeah,
The same
yeah.
as
I
there's no
think,
true capitalist system either, or a true communist
yeah,
system that exists.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So what I'm saying is that like there are, well, no, technically, yeah, technically, if it was a communist country, then I guess the government would own everything. In a social system, you still have the right to make money, except you have to pay probably a lot more taxes because you have to pay for more social programs.
Well, I think the like the traditional like defined socialist country, like actual socialist is the government controls everything, but the people control the government, if
Yeah,
that makes sense. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
democratic, but
yeah,
it's still centralized.
yeah, 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 no, yeah, yeah, definitely. That's the case. So unless we go to a program where we're like, okay, we make lots and lots of money, let's now try to institute more socialist programs where like we're paying, everyone gets like free education, everyone gets free like medical care or anything like that. I think that's the only way we can maybe offset it. But that would be kind of hard because then again, we live within a capitalist system, so you have to find some way to break the power of those people because those people have to pay probably a lot more money to pay off those programs if we want to go into like a true socialist kind of like style in a
Well, I
sense.
mean, so the thing is, in the past, we had extremely high tax rates. They've just been getting like for the rich,
Hmm.
where it's like, okay, after you're making $100 million. The thing is, if you ever talk to any billionaire ever, they just go, "Oh, I have more money than I could ever spend in my entire lifetime."
Yeah,
It's
no
like, well, then
doubt.
why the hell do you have the money? What do you need it for?
Yeah,
Fucking give it to the people.
yeah, but then they don't like paying anything or at all, so that's why they go to offshore taxes, offshore
Yeah,
taxes, things like that.
yeah, and
But
you get all the
what I was saying is that like, you have to somehow break the power, and that's the only way you can actually break the power is doing those socialist programs, and you have to somehow get those
yeah, exactly.
people to like say
I
yes
mean,
to
yeah.
these things. Because no one, like, even if you're rich, you don't want to pay money. Like I'm saying, or maybe you
Well,
don't
some of
care.
them do. Like, well, the Democrats.
Well, I mean, if that was the case, then why are a lot of like rich people running into tax fraud problems and things like that? You know what I'm saying? There's like,
Well, yeah.
yeah, so like that's basically what I'm saying is that like you have to come out and convince all those people because they hold the levers of power essentially.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see like how this is kind of still going on, and I think it's probably not as bad as it was then because literally you like probably there was like a lot smaller middle class than there is now.
I'd have to say, with all the regulations and stuff we have now, it's better health wise and stuff.
Yeah, we're not all working like in factories and shit.
Yeah, we don't have children working in. Yeah. I guess it's better. I don't know. That's hard to say. Because everyone has more wealth, but it's still just as unevenly dispersed.
Good point.
So it's kind of hard to say. Where it's like, well, someone who's lower class right now is definitely better off than someone who's lower class then. But if you looked at like the percentages, where it's like they said the 1% owns as much as all the rest of the 99, it's still like that. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
There's just more money all around.
Yeah, I feel you. That's a good assessment of the things. Um, yeah, I just like the program. I'll definitely check it out. So it's on. I think it's airing on Tuesday. I don't know if I have PBS. Because I have Hulu. I have
I
Hulu Live TV.
Hmm. Do you own a TV?
You can probably watch it on because I think I think you get PBS for free on
I think you can. Yeah, actually, I think you can.
Yeah, so now I'll watch online. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So anything else, Ben? Anything else you want to say? Anything else you got?
Oh no, just anger.
Anger.
Nah, just wealth disparity. It's annoying.
It is annoying. Maybe become president and then you can change that.
Yeah, right. Except you have to be wealthy to become president. Oh, what do you know? It's a cycle.
Well, I don't think Obama was wealthy, was he? He was just a lawyer.
He was well off. He wasn't wealthy, but he wasn't poor.
He was black. That's why. Just kidding. To be fair, I voted for him because he was black. Seriously.
Wait, were you? Oh, you the second time you mean, right?
Yeah.
Wait, were you old enough?
Actually, no. I said if I could have voted, I would just voted because he was black. Fair.
You would have been like 16 at the time, right?
Yeah, no. That's what I'm saying is that like if I was able to vote, I would just be like, you know what, this is something cool. I'm gonna see what's gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? Let's go through an experience for the country. Let's see where things go.
The first time, I mean, hell, the first time I would have just been like, "Oh my God, what's that? What's that woman? Why is she so crazy? Why does she say that Russia's in her backyard? What the hell's wrong with this woman?"
Exactly.
And Sarah Palin scared so many people away. So many people.
So yeah. Oh, I was supposed to say this, but I was gonna say this. I said this at the top of the program, but for the 20th episode, we're gonna do something special. I think we're gonna actually do a video podcast, so it won't just be our audio. So on the YouTube channel, you'll actually see us, and I'll actually edit it so whoever's talking, we basically cut to that thing. But yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do for the 20th podcast. I will try to see if I can get someone for that 20th podcast. Hopefully, it's just more than just us. So we'll see how things go with that. But yeah. So Ben, if you have nothing else to say, you're good to go.
Oh, I'm okay. Yep.
Okay. My voice is dying right now. That's why I kept like, I couldn't say my words. But yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.
Bye.